So here's a great opportunity to learn about the Lunch Hour Legal Marketing Podcast specifically and running marketing through podcasts in general. Gyi and I sat down with Ben and Brian Glass at the Great Legal Marketing event, had a really casual conversation about the pod, how the pod came about, the kind of long, convoluted history of the pod. We also talked about why on earth two competitors would sit down and work together on a marketing channel. And then finally, we talked about what's been successful with the pod, why has it been so good, some of our perspectives on how the pod has grown, how it has been helpful, and why we would never, ever walk away from this.
Welcome to Lunch Hour Legal Marketing, teaching you how to promote, market, and make fat stacks for your legal practice. Here on Legal Talk Network.
So what we're going to do this morning, Conrad and Gyi are going to shoot a live version of their Lunch Hour Legal Marketing podcast, and we'll have Q&A, open Q&A from all of you for that. But I thought one of the principles of speaking is you can never assume that everybody actually knows your story. You have a very famous podcast, you have your very famous brand in the legal marketing space. But I'm curious about a couple of things, like you are competitors, first of all, digital marketing experts. Tell us a little bit, briefly, each of your own sort of personal backstory, and then how this gig got together, that is Lunch Hour Legal Marketing.
So in 2006, I got hit up by a headhunter. I was working at a unethical, underhanded, dirty software company in Seattle.
It's building the trust.
Yeah. And I got hit up by a headhunter to work, to interview with something that at the time was called Legal Brain. And so I interviewed with them. I realized that the people who were funding that was Rich Barton, who started Expedia, rolled off Expedia, and then started Zillow. And my buddy Mark from University of Michigan was the CMO at Zillow. And so I went over to Mark's house and I said, hey, I've got this interview with this thing called Legal Brain, and can you prep me for it? And I brought a pack of IPA, and we drank 6 IPAs, and he taught me everything anyone knew about SEO at the time. And so I walked into that interview looking like a genius, but it was really just 2 hours talking to my buddy Mark. So the guys at Avvo ended up hiring me, and I got to run their SEO from the beginning. And it was really, really fun because none of you guys knew what SEO was. You didn't think that the internet was a way that lawyers would be found. You didn't think it was ethical for people to write reviews of lawyers. And so it was kind of shooting fish in a barrel. So Avvo went from nothing to I've always said it was the #1 legal directory from a traffic perspective. We did that in like 2 years, partly because there was no one else doing it. Tim Stanley from Justia was doing it. There was Chris,
FindLaw was doing it.
FindLaw, Chris Silversmith. Chris Silversmith was at FindLaw. He was really good. That was it. It was the 3 of us. And so I got to learn this stuff when it was really easy. Then when Avvo kind of got bigger and bigger, and we started calling you like mad, and you guys got mad about the...
How many people were here at the dawn of Avvo and were like all pissed off that this was happening? Yes, wondering, who the hell are these guys?
It was a cool ride. It was a really, really cool ride, and then it kind of got big and corporate, got sold to internet brands, and that was financially good for me, but it wasn't professionally good for me. And so I started working directly with lawyers, which is what I've been doing ever since. And that's kind of my origin story on this. You've got a more traditional story.
Yeah, mine's super boring. I used to bartend.
Wait, you thought that was exciting?
I used to serve beer to Conrad.
That's true. I was wondering where this is going to come up.
Yeah, I used to be a bartender at Michigan, and Conrad was playing rugby and would come into my bar, and we didn't know each other though. I was a computer science major. I was kind of like technical mind. I thought I was going to go into computer engineering, but this was back in the late 90s. It wasn't as cool as it is now, although now computer science majors can't get jobs anymore because there's no
I
junior
was going to say,
programmers.
that was really appreciative
There was a
of you.
period of coolness of it, but I ended up not wanting to be a coder, so I became a philosophy major, which is super practical, but wouldn't trade my philosophy degree for anything. Didn't want to go into academia. I was probably a little bit over enamored with being in court, and so I went to law school. I practiced law for about 2 years. As the young lawyer, people were like, hey, what should we be doing for marketing? Did research, talked to a lot of lawyers, same sentiment, like people aren't going to use the internet to hire lawyers. This is like 2004, 2005. I was like, they already are. By 2007, 2008, I was convinced that there was a business because of what I saw in the marketplace wasn't very good, in my opinion. And so we started AttorneySync in 2008. Met Conrad through Avvo. And, I like to use the Simon Sinek term, where we are worthy rivals, because there's plenty of blue ocean of lawyers that are getting either underserved by their marketing people or have no marketing function at all. And so plenty of opportunity for us. And so we inherited Lunch Hour Legal Marketing from Legal Talk Network. There was a guy named Jared Correa who actually started it and decided he didn't want to do it anymore. I picked it up as a co-host. I don't remember what year it was, but I did it with a employee at AttorneySync. We did it for a while. She went on to do other things. And so I was like, hey, you know what? It'd be awesome if Conrad joined me on this show. And so how many years have we been doing the show now?
I think we're about 4 years in.
4 years. And and so we are grateful that people we were very cynical and skeptical, as we usually are, that people would like to listen to us. But here we are, and grateful to be here.
I'm curious, why do you think you were cynical and skeptical? Is that just like natural entrepreneur self-doubt that I have anything to say, or?
So I think probably some of that. Probably also it's like a legal marketing podcast. Like, people actually want to regularly. How do you talk about legal marketing twice a month for an hour? And fortunately, we are so full of hot air that we come up with new things. And look, it's a dynamic thing, and as we know, it's competitive out there. Obviously, I think also this audience is tuned into legal marketing, but like as a big thing, I think a lot of lawyers think of it as a necessary evil. They're like, I got to do this marketing stuff, but I want to practice law, and we can talk about some of that. Depending on what your role is in your firm and what you're trying to build, people have different perceptions of it. And so I was very much like, are people really going to want to tune in twice a week? Are there enough lawyers and legal marketing folks that are interested in this subject matter to be a podcast and maybe something more?
I mean, when we started, it was monthly.
Yeah.
And then we convinced LTN to move it to twice a month.
And Conrad's trying to go weekly.
I want to push it weekly. I love it because I love talking. I'm not good at a lot of things, but that I'm good at.
All right, so that's cool. So then, if you were to do this weekly, and you guys cover a lot of ground, I think, in every podcast, how do you get your material? Because weekly would seem like, oh my, that's a lot of prep.
Yeah.
I'm curious to each of you, so your habit in terms of seeing material in the world and then saying, oh, okay, that might be something we could work with.
So I think there's two elements to this. Number one is you have to build up a legacy group of evergreen content. Stuff that is going to apply 6 months from now, 9 months from now. So it's content maybe we haven't recorded, maybe we've already recorded it and we've got it in the hopper ready to go if we need to, but it's stuff that is not timely. And the other part of it is you have to have the discipline on the regular to when you see stuff all the time and you're like, wow, that's cool. And so we just have a shared Word doc. It's not a Word doc, it's a Google Doc that we throw things in, or I sometimes.
That Conrad doesn't even use.
I don't use all that often. I often send it to Gyi as email and then he gets annoyed. But you just have to pick things up and look. You have to always be looking for this stuff, right? And I don't care if we're driving and I see a weird billboard. I don't care if I'm looking at the news. I don't care if we're on our mastermind group or if someone sends us a question. You have to just always be looking for ideas, and they're out there. You just have to be looking for them.
How do you guys actually prep for each episode?
So we do.
Maybe you can say we don't.
No.
We do.
It's really important.
We do, and we're gathering all this stuff all the time, and then an hour before recording, essentially, we spend going through we call it the rundown. So we have a sheet that's the rundown that gives us the framework for the show. So there's some, typically, as you'll see today, we do some banter at the beginning, we do a news segment, and then we usually do 2 different segments. We vary a little bit in that, but we pick from the topics that we've captured in the news or things that we've seen that we're supposed to put in the rundown, or Conrad emailed me, and we talk about kind of prep. But I'll tell you, we find it's like a balance, because some prep. So the prep's great because it allows you to go deeper on something, right? Because you can actually be like, all right, I've got my notes here. I can go deep on a topic, but it starts to get more quote unquote canned the more that you prep. And so we found, even like we've talked about this all the time, just like even recording just the prep, because so much gold comes out of the conversations in the prep. And so, if you're doing a podcast, and I'd be happy to talk more about like the details of like what podcasts we think work for lawyers, but it's like that random kind of content that really tends to be the best conversations, even beyond the prep. But the prep helps. I mean, it wouldn't be as good without the prep.
I think the rule that we've learned is, like, once you start going a little bit deep on a topic in the prep part, you have to put a bullet in it and hold it, because when you try and repeat the gold of when you're excited about something, it never comes out as genuine or as passionate. And he can get riled up really easily.
Yeah,
and
like
so you want to be able to capture that when you're actually recording. We've actually toyed with recording the prep and using that sometimes.
Yeah, and we do outtakes from time to time, because even sometimes, we're also beneficiaries of Legal Talk Network does all of the production. So we have an audio engineer and video content person, and obviously we have a distribution network through the Legal Talk Network. They do all the heavy lift on actually making us sound good and adding the sound effects and things, and post-production we always laugh about. But we do capture a lot of those outtakes because they end up being pretty good content. And the other thing that I would say that's been huge for us is the you recording video as well and doing the social media clips. So if you do a podcast, I think this idea of being like multimedia is really important. You can use the clips to promote the podcast and not just be stuck in the audio format.
Do you have any questions, Brian? I've got more, but go ahead.
Yep. So one of the things that happens when you produce a bunch of content is that people consume it, they come up to you, and you don't remember what you said. I'm curious if there's anything that you guys have been like epically wrong about and then got confronted with 3 months, 6 months later.
Well, we don't say anything wrong ever, but we do forget all the time.
That's a good question.
Nothing's coming to mind, but I'm sure we've done this.
You've done a couple of like prediction shows.
Right, we got those
and
wrong.
And then I've heard the recaps of those.
Yes,
we've got some
those-
predictions
we've got
wrong. I think
predictions
the
wrong.
bigger problem, we've talked about this internally, is Gyi and I are out there yammering to you guys, and then we've got our staff that's trying to like do work for you guys, and sometimes it'll be like what Conrad's saying and what Conrad's staff are saying are not perfectly aligned. So I've now made, and I apologize to them every time, but like they have to listen to this because we can't be speaking differently. They have to.
I'll tell you my kind of reaction to that question is this issue of, and I think this is true for everybody, it's not just unique to us, but look, we have a podcast, we put a lot of content on the world. There's not a lot of context. And so people will, whether you read a blog post or you listen to a podcast or even you come to a conference, the context is what matters. And so what I see is I'll hear somebody interpret something that I said, and I'm like, that's not exactly what I meant. And I think that that's a bigger issue, even than whether I'm right or wrong. Like, and again, we're very self-deprecating about it. Like, I don't believe that you should listen to we love that you listen to the podcast, but don't take the podcast isn't the end-all be-all on whether we're right or wrong. You're going to lack context, and you're getting our bite-sized snippets. I think on the newer stuff, like when you're getting news items and things, I think that's helpful. But you got to keep perspective that it's not like you're not getting the full thing. Sometimes you're getting a soundbite, and it's true for me as a consumer myself. Like you have to be very conscientious about the accountability of listening to some of this content because a lot of it is taken out of context.
I think you're very good, Conrad, when you are dealing with listener questions about prefacing with "it depends," and it really is.
Yeah.
What this event is all about, what Great Legal Marketing has always been about, is what do you want to actually build first? Let's be real clear about that, and then which of these tools can help us, if we take action, move towards what we actually want to build. Many of us in the room have podcasts of sort of different sizes and different technical things running in the background. What would you say to lawyers who are running podcasts and have actually gotten past episode number 5, which is kind of where most podcasts die, in terms of either technical, it's great that you've got a company behind you, you have sponsors even, or just the whole art of being interesting?
I love how you say the art of being interesting. I think the heart, so you mentioned, most people are podcast 5. We did a study, 83% of podcasts fail within the first 6 months because you give up on it. And so, I'm going to come back to the art of being interesting. The key on this, and this is a real benefit that we have with Legal Talk Network, more than anything else, they do amazing post-production work, they get the sponsors, like they do all of the work, we just show up and blah, 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 right? Which is awesome for us. But they have sponsors, which means the sponsors are expecting a show every 2 weeks, which means they hold us to account to get that out. We do not have an option, right? We do not have it's Easter, or I don't feel like it, or I sound like crap because I've got a sore throat. Like, we do not have an option not to record. And so the long-term discipline to make this work is really fascinating, which then brings us back to how do you keep it interesting? Sometimes we have our pre-production meeting and we're like, fuck, there's nothing.
Got nothing.
There's nothing to talk about right now, right? And that really only happens when you stop looking during the week, right? Where you have lost that discipline to do that. So there's interesting stuff that's happening all the time. You guys get asked interesting questions all the time. There is always fascinating context out there. There's always stuff that's going on in your community. There's always stuff that's interesting. You have to be looking for it, and you have to have the discipline to capture it, however you capture it, right? And so I think that's the art of making it interesting all the time.
Well, and I'll go back to something that Ben brought up, because I've been thinking about it in why we do this for ourselves. But the first thing is why are you going to do a podcast? If you're going to do a podcast because you want to have top of mind awareness in your local community so that people think of you because they might hire you, that's going to take you down this path. And then on the interesting side, the great part about that is that if you're not interesting, have a guest that is interesting. And so because I know a lot of lawyers will say, this just isn't my shtick. I'm not into the podcast thing. I'm not, my personality is not going to be a good jive, but there's ways you can get around that to attach your quote-unquote brand to the podcast with local guests who might be interesting, covering local topics that might be interesting, if that's the purpose. There's a lot of different purposes for podcasts. There might be, maybe it's to develop referral relationships with other lawyers, and so you're going to have lawyer guests on. But I think we tend to think of this thing of, and again, this is the context part. I don't want people to come away from this being the only way a podcast can work is if I'm super interesting and funny and self-deprecating like Conrad and Gyi are. It depends on what you're trying to do, and then the workarounds for if it's not really your thing, but you think that might be a medium that might be useful for your practice. I would start thinking about things in your local, if the purpose is to be top of mind in your local community for what you do, I'd be thinking about okay, where are the overlaps with my quote-unquote affinity audiences? What am I into outside of practicing law? Who are the people in that community that might be interesting to talk to about that? And then use the guest to kind of help you, quote-unquote, be more interesting. I don't know why I'm saying quote-unquote so much right now.
But there's a couple of keys to this. One of the hard parts is, and I hate to say this, most of what you do is not interesting, right? And it's not interesting to most people most of the time. And talking about the practice of law is really hard, and most of the time it's dull, right? Maybe you're covering celebrity divorces or something like that. But Gyi mentioned affinity. Getting people to like who you are. There's lots of different ways to be interesting about the things that you are interested in that aren't the 7 things to do after you've been rear-ended in a car accident, right? And so I feel I would love to push lawyers to be more interested and interesting about things that are outside the practice of law. I'll use you as an example. You talk about soccer refereeing all the time. That's a parenting thing, it's a coaching thing, it's a kids development thing. That's nothing to do with the practice of law. It's super interesting, right? And so that resonates with, by the way, most of you guys who have kids have had your kids play youth soccer, right? That is a true fact. So like there's an affinity right there because of something that he is genuinely interested in and does all the time that has nothing to do with the practice of law. That's interesting. The other thing that I want to bring up, and Gyi mentioned this, our show is a little bit, everyone thinks they're special. We're special. We're a little bit unique in most podcasts use the guest format. And it's frankly, it's an easier format. And the theory of this goes, okay, I'm going to basically glom onto someone else's audience, right? So we're going to have, some fancy guest, and you guys will all know who that is, and we're going to interview that person, and then people who are interested in Murphy are going to listen to that podcast. And the theory goes, will then be so interested in me and Gyi that they're going to subscribe to the podcast. It doesn't happen by and large. And so what's worked for us has really, we have 1 or 2 guests a year, maybe. We've recently recorded a lot of not even podcast guests, but more interviews. But there is a limitation with that guest thing, right? There is a limitation to that.
I'm pro guest, by the way.
One of the limitations is the guest sometimes can be dreadfully
They're horrible.
not good.
That's right.
They're horrible. And so
That's your
but
job.
what happens
Curate
is
your guests.
you curate the guests, but we get, I don't know, how many emails a day do we get asking to be guests on the podcast, right? And if they become guests on the podcast, that means they're paying some PR person to try and get more publicity and more listens and blah, blah, blah. And that what that really means is what they really want to do is talk about and promote whatever the thing that is that they happen to do, right? That is so awful, right? Go find guests who aren't being pimped by PR people. Go find guests who are interesting people who you genuinely connect with, who you can have a conversation with, that isn't pushing some awful paid agenda.
Did you know?
No, I mean, I have an add-on. The add-on to that is those people are much more likely to actually share your episode and get somebody else to listen to it, right? So the people who, the professional guests aren't then pushing the episode out to their audience because they're paying somebody to build their audience. It's the person who's never been on a podcast before that's going to share it with all their friends and family and might actually get you the glom on effect that Conrad was talking about. And by the way, everything that you just said about affinity groups, it's not just podcasts, it's social media, it's your newsletter, it's all of the marketing that we're doing. Just be an interesting person in the community and don't talk about the law, and then people will know, like, and trust you and come and hire you for the law.
That's right. And the other thing too that we always fall into this trap of is this idea of well, how do we measure its effectiveness?
Yeah.
And and so it's because you think about the guests because you're okay, I'm going to glom onto this audience or I'm going to get more subscribers. Who cares? I would just abandon all that thinking. The only place that you want it to show up is if people are hey, how'd you hear about us? Oh, I've been listening to your podcast, or I've been following you on social media. And again, not a one-for-one, you're trying to do direct response attribution for every single client that comes in. If you just hear it coming up, make a note in hopefully you have a CRM or you've got something that's tracking how clients are finding you. If you just hear people talking about it, that's what you really care about. Again, if your purpose is to use a podcast or any kind of media vehicle to generate business, you should be focused on is it showing up at all? Not in if you got 10,000 subscribers and not a single one of them is going to become a client of yours, unless you're selling advertising or some other sponsorship, it's not doing anything from a business standpoint for you. It's a vanity metric. And by the way, it's the other thing that drives me nuts. The internet is all fake. Most of the people, most of these podcasts that you go and watch and you're oh, they've got 10,000 subscribers or this lawyer's got 1 million TikTok followers. Go click in and look at the followers, who they are. It's largely all fake. They paid somebody to just create fake profiles to boost to amplify what they look like online, but it's all trash. So I would say focus on if you've got, in your local community, again, I don't know you, but in your local community, you've got 100 people in your local community are listening to you every week on a podcast. That's amazing. And then so you want to hear that it's coming up in conversations in the community, people are talking about it, and most importantly in intake, people are how'd you hear about us? Well, I've been a huge fan of your podcast for the last year.
I know what's going to happen here.
A prediction.
What? Hey, Gyi.
Don't be wrong.
Are there any legal podcasts that you would like to call out for doing something like that?
No.
Buying followers?
No, I don't talk trash.
Okay.
How has it been for business?
Very good. I won't speak for Conrad, but Lunch Hour Legal Marketing shows up on our CRM a lot.
Yeah, I mean, it's good. And it's again, I'll reiterate it because I feel like you guys don't get it, and we tell you the wrong things all the time. It is one of the influences on people contacting us. It is one of many influences on people contacting us. And the podcast in and of itself, as a individual thing, I don't think works extremely well. I think as you have this, as some of the content goes onto social, as we're at events like this, these things all build on themselves. And so it is one of many things. And that is what's going to happen in a law firm, right? And there are some things that are direct response. Podcasts are not direct response, right? Most of your social media work is not direct response. And so it just requires time.
Do you guys ever compare sales notes and you have somebody who calls and says, I'm talking to AttorneySync and Mockingbird because I listen to the podcast. Give me your best pitch.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we right now,
This is awesome.
we get people that are like, tell me why you're different than Mockingbird. And I'm like, go hire Mockingbird.
So one of the
Conrad's
worst.
like, yeah, thanks.
No. This is the worst meal I've ever been to. We had and the funny thing is he hired neither of us. We had a prospect who's in my neck of the woods.
It was a great meal.
It was a great meal. The meal was fantastic. The conversation was horrible.
It was great.
Gyi comes out to meet with this prospect in my town, and he's like, why don't you come to dinner with us? And I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? And I'm like, no. And he's like, no, it's totally fine. I just want this guy to hire, to make a good hire. He had talked to us, like we knew who he was, blah, blah. Anyway, we go to dinner, and the prospect, I saw him the other day, by the way, he's like, so which one of you should I hire? He asks us, we're having a cheeseburger. And both of us are like, we're pointing at each other, like we're playing the polite game. Dude still was Scorpion, which absolutely chaps my ass. So,
There's more to that story that we probably can't share, but
Jesus.
look, and again, my point there is so to answer the question, like, yeah, it does happen, but again, a lot of times, and you know this with partners that you've worked with, some of it's just like you resonate with an account person, or you like the strategy, or you like the approach. And my view is like we're looking for right fit clients. Like if Conrad and I are like fighting over something about like trying to convince somebody to come with us, like I feel like we're doing it wrong.
Yeah, I mean, it's putting the customers. Here's the other thing, and you guys probably live in this world too. There are a lot of terrible lawyers out there. There are a lot of terrible digital marketing agencies out there. And we just come at this with a perspective of like, I want you to make a good decision because you're talking about the future of your firm. You're talking about whether or not you can buy the mountain house. You're talking about whether or not you retire at 65 instead of 70, right? Like all of these things are very real. I just want you to make a good decision. And you've already, I know you've taken a step to doing a really considered approach to selecting an agency because you're talking to the both of us. Now that is completely self-gratifying, I get that, but it's also genuine.
Cool, guys. Thanks for that background.
Thanks,
Thank
Ben.
you.
Money makes it makes a world go round. Money makes a world go round. Yeah, money make a world go round. Yeah, money